мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
We are under attack. It is an attack against Western democracies and on the institutions that bind them.
What Russia's much more interested in doing is depicting the West as a failure.
Regiment, President Yanukovych, they were trying to protect their enormous wealth.
This is Kremlin File.
If anything is relevant in this context, it is to study how somebody who is not really a political person, not really interested in political affairs, who doesn't like vaccinations, who likes natural medicine, and who is all kumbaya and all loving the nature, and how that type of person can be brought to be instrumentalized to a level where it is demonstrating against the Americans in front of the American embassy, because that person is now convinced that the Americans have hijacked all serum on the market, have hijacked deliveries of masks, and want to keep that everything for themselves. And from the state of somebody who just doesn't like vaccination and loves the nature, to an active, operative, and demonstrating with far-right, among other forces, far-right movements in front of the American embassy in Leipzig, there is a whole story that needs to be studied. And that's the role of counterintelligence.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I often look at people, even here, who I see they're on either their personalities, either on social media, they get like followers, and then all of a sudden they go boom, and they've got 40,000, or they get to 100,000. And you used a word that was really, I'd like you to expand on it just a little bit, because I don't think the Russians go in, because a lot of people say, oh, there's compromat. Everybody's using this word, right? But the way I look at it is sort of, the devil is really attractive, right? If we think of the way, that they actually operate. You use the word cultivate. Can you just expand a little bit on that? What do you mean by cultivate? What do they actually do?
Well, if you consider that a target person is someone who has a psychological profile, a personality, weaknesses, strengths, vulnerabilities, all this is documented, it's analyzed, and it's done professionally. And what comes out of a psychogram is the possibilities, the possible advantage that this person can bring to the cause, or to the mission, in that case of Russian intelligence. See a human being as not a human being, and see how they use the target person for their own benefit. That's the understanding behind. So that person will have strength, but it will have weaknesses. And the weaknesses will be cultivated along the line of complexes, for instance, or aspirations, or frustrations. All this will be fed by a contact person, later a handler, because they promise themselves that this target person will bring something to them: information, influence, opening doors, can be used in any way possible. And this can be a very low-rank secretary in an administration, because they think she could play a potential role in the future, or a high-ranking personality, political, somebody who's on the political scene. But we should not think that they go after the big fish.
No.
Automatically.
No.
They also go after little hands. So this is the mentality behind the cultivation. It is an art. In the trade of intelligence, it plays a very important role, specifically because the factor time is important. So it takes many years, takes patience, it takes a lot of psychological investment, and the trade is complicated. The good thing is that since we had many defectors, we know a lot about this trade.
And how they do it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
From your experience, because this is what I've noticed, that over the past several years, Russia's cultivation, indoctrination, specifically on social media, of people inside the countries, they have been pushing them into acting more violent. So whereas before they used them behind the keyboard, now they are pushing them to go burn masks, to go storm buildings, to go, whether it's America, whether it's Venezuela, Brazil. You see this like move of people who are now taking their anger and their frustrations and clearly under the control, even if, they don't even have a handler, it could just be on social media. They fall into a group where they kind of reinforce each other's feelings.
Yes, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and then they move it out now to actually commit violent attacks. Have you seen that rise also?
Yes, we have seen that. Specifically, I mentioned the COVID crisis. But we have seen that during after the beginning of the war against Ukraine. So yes, you have these troll factories with people who infiltrate chat groups everywhere. I mean, they are on Contacte, they are on Twitter, they are everywhere. On TikTok, meanwhile. You even find them on Instagram. Can you imagine that? Yes, there is this this ability to federate anger and to exacerbate narratives. So, from a narrative example, which we have encountered in the framework of our watching what was going on online during or starting February 2022. You have people who are fundamentally pacifists. Fundamentally pacifist because, for instance, in the German language information space, you have people who still are heavily impacted by of course, the education they have received, and the historical knowledge of what war means and has meant when Germany declared the war against Poland, and then literally created the disaster we know with the Holocaust, etc., etc. So these people are fundamentally convinced that war is not the answer, and that Germans should not get involved in participating in acts of war in any type of form, and be it only because the government agrees to supply weapons. So you have these people, and we know that from the 50s, these people existed in Germany, in the 60s, in the 70s, and we know how the Soviet Union worked with these people. They actually were behind the peace movement, which they infiltrated and completely controlled. Well, we have witnessed exactly the same thing happening right now. Just like they have spotted potential for radicalization of the queer movement, they have been behind the resurrection of the peace movement. And so you have these people of whom you would think they are not ideologically pro-Russian, turning into instruments of pro-Russian propaganda. And there you have all kinds of level. Of course, you have the level of disinformation, so accusing the Ukrainian government of being a Nazi government, and then you have the Azov-related disinformation, and then you have the fakes that are sent around about alleged crimes of the Ukrainian armed forces, etc., etc., etc. And you have among this group a readiness to accept that at the end of the day, Ukraine should sit at the table and negotiate, because war is not the answer. And Germany is portrayed in these groups, for this target group, as a country that is making things worse because it agrees to join the other allies in delivering weapons to Ukraine. And the radicalization of the narratives in these groups is absolutely stunning. Why is it stunning? Because we are speaking of peaceniks, basically, right? Who indulge in pushing narratives that are literally outrageous, extremely radicalized, and blank disinformation. So the narrative prevailing among the pacifist is that, well, Russia offered negotiations, Ukraine refused, Ukraine is the belligerent. Then you have the alleged, the fairy tale, if you will, about the oppression. It's not a fairy, it's not a right word, but the nonsense about the alleged oppression. Yeah, the alleged oppression, linguistic oppression, and my experience is that countering with information will not help. I mean, if you explain that people in Kherson speak Russian and they still are the target of attacks from the Russians, it's not landing there, you know. It's not a narrative that is accepted. These allegedly peace-loving, peace activists, negotiation obsessed at any cost, they are an interesting group. They are almost as interesting as the first group I described. Now, how the Russian operatives handle them is something that remains to be investigating. I mean, the German counterintelligence has issued warnings in the past about the way the Russians infiltrate such movements. And we know that ideologically, at the very beginning, the people who first demonstrated against the war, they were near to Christian movements. They were not Ukraine haters, but eventually the groups morphed into a bunch of useful idiots. And there again, just like in the example of the Querdenker, it is really the job of specialists of info warfare to see how they got from A to Z. And the radicalization is stunning. Stunning. If you see what is said online and read the discussions in the groups, which if you manage to infiltrate 1 or 2 groups, you get the picture. It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's done on a wholesale. And it's done on a wholesale scale now because of social media. Because when KGB agents in the Soviet Union were operating, you know, on European or US soil, you know, they were lucky if they can convince 5 people. Now they have access to billions of people to do it simultaneously, you know, based on their ideology, based on, you know, their motives and whatnot. So it's definitely stunning.
Well, I mean, we are in the age of cyber information warfare, and now we are heading to the Armageddon with AI. So those are challenges.